This is the Outfall.
This is the Outfall.
This is the Outfall,
where water,
infrastructure,
and untold stories meet.
We had a spool piece we could drop in and send pure lake water to our customers, which we all laughed when we made that decision and had that pit put in. And that spool piece made that when the zombie apocalypse happened, we'll put that in. And I looked at my staff and I said, okay, the zombie apocalypse is here, put the spool piece in.
Welcome to the Outfall. I'm Robert, and today we're looking at a water crisis that revealed just how fragile our most essential infrastructure can be. On September 27th, 2024, Hurricane Helene carved a path of destruction across the southeast, killing over 250 people and leaving millions without power from Florida to Virginia. But nowhere was the impact more prolonged than in the mountains of western North Carolina, where the storm turned Asheville, a city of nearly 100,000 people, into an island cut off from the world, with water customers facing a crisis that would stretch over 50 days. What you're about to hear is the raw, unfiltered account from David Melton, Director of Water Resources for the city of Asheville, who lived through every moment of the crisis, from watching his reservoir fill 8 feet overnight to making the gut-wrenching decision to send untreated lake water to residents' taps. David's story reveals the impossible choices and the heroic efforts that kept a city alive when its lifeline was severed. Dr. Ladner and I interviewed David Melton earlier this spring. This is his story in his own words.
Well, my name is David Melton, and I'm Director of Water Resources here for the city of Asheville, North Carolina. Our service area is somewhere in the neighborhood of 160,000 to 200,000 customers any given day. We have 3 water treatment plants. We have the North Fork, which is our largest water treatment plant, and the William DeBrule plant. Both of those are in the eastern part of our service area, and those two provide about 80% of the demand for each day. We have a third water treatment plant is the Mills River water treatment plant, which of course is in Mills River, and it makes up the other percentage, the other 20 or so percent. Of course, we were tracking the weather, tracking all the forecasts. We actually just went through, the fire department led this for us. We redid our emergency action plan. So on Wednesday, before Helene got here, I set up our departmental command center, and later that day, the fire department set up the overall city command center. So we were prepared, monitoring. We actually started staffing it the Thursday before it happened. So we were attentively watching and knew it was going to be big, but we didn't know it was going to be, nobody knew it was going to be as big as it was. So everything was already saturated. The French Broad and the Shenandoah River were already up. They were still in their banks at that point, but all the levels were still up. So that was one thing we were attentively watching as well as everything progressed. Well, we filled up. This was probably late Friday. Our reservoir at North Fork was down about 8 feet, and we filled up overnight. That's when the moment hit that was like, okay, this isn't going to be good. I actually left that morning about 5:30 going to the command center, and one of the paths I could take was along the Shenandoah River, which probably wasn't the smartest move I could have made. It worked out. Then I actually called my wife and I said, the Shenandoah was about to crest. Got to the command center. Of course, the rain was still coming at that point. And we had made a huge investment that ended up being a timely investment as we improved our dams at North Fork and actually installed an auxiliary spillway, which has 8 fuse gates with it. Water doesn't go over those fuse gates, and it's okay if some goes over. But what happens to protect the dam, when it reaches a certain level, those fuse gates lift out one by one. We have water flying over the fuse gates, so we knew it was imminent that one of the fuse gates was going to tip. which by design it's supposed to protect the main dam. We actually put a 4-foot parapet wall on the main dam at North Fork, and we have water up against it. So we knew it was a serious situation. Later on that morning, probably somewhere between 10 and 11, the fuse gate did tip at that point in time. By design, it worked within inches of what it was supposed to. So that was good and definitely saved the dam. Had the dam failed, it would have been catastrophic for sure. Shortly after that, we lost all 3 transmission main lines leaving the water plant. So we virtually had no way to get water to our customers into the system other than our southern plant, which it kept trucking right along the whole time, which was good. So we weren't totally out of water. We were producing about 23, 24 million at that point in time, and it pegged out at 37 million, and that's as high as the instruments go. So we knew something had turned loose, something really major at that point. So folks were out closing valves and doing things to keep from draining the clear well and other things like that. But at that point, we knew we were out, and it was going to be a while before we could get water back. What happened is there was so much water. One of the lines, it was a bypass line, and we did that at the same time as we were doing the work on the dam. And we took it under the riverbed, out of the flow of the river, then tied it back in downstream. So what happened is it just unearthed all the pipes, is what happened. The river channel is probably about 20 feet deeper than it was before. It just took all the earth out from around the pipes. We were able to get to some valves in the yard of the plant to be able to kind of isolate everything off. Well, from there, we had folks out where they could get to, checking, seeing where pipes still were, where they weren't, checking our pump stations. We got about 52 pump stations. So we had people doing that, sending back information, those kind of things. When the water went down, our engineering department actually contacted, we've got 3 fantastic local contractors here that do a good bit of pipe work for us and different things. One's a road contractor and the other 2 are utility contractors. So our engineering department reached out to those folks. Once the water went down and we saw, I was going to say what we had, but really it's what we didn't have. So they came out. I had those 3 contractors in my conference room the Monday after it hit. And they said, we know what needs to be done. Let's go to work. And that was no contracts in place, no nothing. Well, all 3 of the contractors actually live on our water system too. So not only did they have a vested interest in the community and getting things back up as fast as possible, they had a personal stake in it too. What we decided to do is the bypass line I mentioned earlier, that was 36-inch ductile iron line with river crossing pipe and everything else. So you can imagine some of the force it took to take that pipe out. There was a span of about 350 feet. So we made a decision to get that put back together first. We had a spool piece we could drop in and send pure lake water to our customers, which we all laughed when we made that decision and had that pit put in. And that spool piece made that when the zombie apocalypse happened, we'll put that in. And I looked at my staff and I said, okay, the zombie apocalypse is here, put the spool piece in. Which for a water quality guy, that was a tough decision to make. But 2 very important things that did is it restored what I call flushing water. So folks could at least flush their toilets, which avoided what I feared we were heading towards a health crisis just for that piece of it. And the other piece of that gets lost a little bit too was doing that where we restored fire protection. So those were 2 very, very major things. Of course, the fire departments, the county fire departments, and our local fire department here at the city had already made provisions just in case. So they were going to draft off of lakes and do the other things if they had to do that. We actually got that put back together in like 18 days, which was pretty phenomenal on our contractors' part. We had a lot of down trees in our watershed. The Brule or the Bee Tree watershed and the North Fork watershed together is about 22,000 acres that backs up to the National Forest. So very pristine, very protected watershed. But we had tons of trees down, debris, so we got a lot of silt. At the William DeBrule plant, I think the turbidity hit 300 at one point. Then at North Fork, it hit around 90, which just doesn't, and Dr. Ladner will appreciate this, it just doesn't work for a direct filtration plant. So we had a huge issue of turbidity, and the turbidity was at first was basically mud. So just no way to treat that. So that was very challenging. Then the turbidity kind of turned to clay colloids from there, which was a little bit easier to treat. So we were at the plants, the Bee Tree shut down because we just couldn't do anything with 300 NTU. But at North Fork, we would try to treat water really slowly and see what we could do. We ended up having to skim filters a couple of times and do those kind of things. But luckily, we got to the point where we could treat. So we started blending treated water with the lake water. And I failed to mention, too, we highly chlorinated the lake water that was going to town just out of abundance of caution for that. We actually had EPA Region 4 on site with us Monday or Tuesday after it happened as well. Of course, FEMA was on the ground and embedded with us as soon as they can get here too. And I think that was Tuesday of that week. So we had plenty of guidance and plenty of EPA support, and we were chlorinating at about 8 parts per million going out. So we were able to begin to treat some water, nowhere near what our demand was. So we kind of stepped that water back through the system, which I think really helped us lift our boil water notice. We were able to do that in about 52 days. So, of course, people being out of water, flushing the toilets, doing all the things, helped us pull that chlorinated water through. And when we had to blend the water, of course, we were doing tons of sampling, too, throughout the system during all this. Just monitoring the whole system and making sure at least we had chlorine residual and those kind of things. Did some turbidity curtains around the intake at North Fork, which we still have those in place, and actually treated the lake within that curtain and on the outside of the curtain too, to see if we could drop some of that turbidity down. We used a mixture of alum and caustic is what we did. So it was basically the same chemicals we used in the treatment process. And what we found out is there wasn't a single silver bullet to make it work, but it did help some. What really helped us a lot was time. And also we had the Army Corps of Engineers out, and we've got temporary staff plants at both William DeBrule and North Fork now. We had commissioned a study because we knew we had already been in conversations with North Carolina DEQ and folks. And those two plants are the last two direct filtration plants in the state. And when Fred came through, the Bee Tree or William DeBrule plant was offline for over a month. So we knew we were going to, at some point, need to switch to conventional treatment on those. So we commissioned a study, and the long-term solution is plate settlers at both plants. Of course, the sedimentation that goes along with that, sed basins and those kind of things. So that's kind of the long-term plan. In fact, Friday before last, we got our RFQs back for the design of that system. We knew we were going to have to do it at some point, but we really and truly, we thought it would be more like 5-8 years out. And Helene said, hold on a minute, hold my beer. You need to do it now. I think things I would recommend is in South Carolina have strong water-worn organizations. That proved to be immeasurable in those. We had folks here, once we figured out what we had and what we needed, we had folks here from all over North Carolina helping through the water-worn network. The other thing would be to get to know your county emergency folks, your local emergency folks. That's a big thing, not only if you need the help, but if you can provide the help to other utilities. We do a lot of conferences and do a lot of things, but those relationships that you build through that is you just can't put a value on it. I had folks calling me from both states. What can we do? We're ready to help. But what do you and your family need personally? So some of those things, those pull you through times that are tough for sure. So that would be lessons learned, is build those relationships, because like I said, you just can't put a value on those. The only other thing I would add is something that amazed me throughout the process is the way the communities came together. It was amazing to see neighbors helping neighbors, neighbors checking on other neighbors, taking care of each other. And we, throughout this, have had tons of community support, which has been fantastic.
A big thank you to David Melton for taking time to share his story with us. As we record this in August of 2025, the permanent pre-filtration system is estimated to cost around $250 million and could take 3 to 5 years to complete. By the way, we've covered Hurricane Helene in 2 previous episodes last year. One explored the eerie parallels between Helene and the Great Flood of 1916, 2 catastrophic events that reshaped Western North Carolina over a century apart. The other featured South Carolina state climatologist and my good buddy Hope Mazzell, who walked us through the storm's development and record-breaking rainfall. You can find both of those episodes along with all our show notes and links at theoutfall.com. David's story reminds us that behind every turn of the tap is a group of dedicated professionals working round the clock to deliver one of life's most essential services. In a world where big data and the wonders of AI are celebrated, when everything breaks down, it's the real-world relationships, contractors who live on your water system, colleagues from neighboring utilities who call to ask what you need personally, communities that come together to help each other. That actually keeps the water flowing. I'm Robert, and this has been The Outfall. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.